Joining us now is House of Delegates member Scott Taylor. He's also a candidate for Congress, a Republican in the 2nd District. That nomination for Congress for the seat of the retiring Scott Ridge will be decided in a primary on June 14th. So if you're in the 2nd District, circle that date, Tuesday, June 14th. And remember, this is an open primary, which means that if you're a registered voter in the 2nd District, you can vote in this primary. There are 3 candidates. Current District 4 Congressman moving to the 2nd District, Randy Forbes, Virginia Beach attorney Pat Cardwell, and House of Delegates member from Virginia Beach, former Navy SEAL Scott Taylor. Scott, good to have you with us.
John, good morning.
Now, you've been under fire the last week. The Randy Forbes for Congress campaign unleashing a torrent of a negative advertising on you on the internet and in the mail. And this was not from a super PAC that you can't really find who they are. This was from Randy Forbes for Congress. Very negative mail pieces blasting you on a whole bunch of things that I don't want to go into. But many of our listeners have seen this mail piece. I know you fired back. Can you defend yourself on it?
Yeah, I just not to beat the dead horse, of course, but it's pretty clear why they're doing that. They're losing. So if you have a failing campaign and you attack, and if you have not much of a record, if you're a dynamic congressman, then you could perhaps justify leaving your people behind to save your own butt. Actually, you can't justify leaving your people behind to save your own butt. But there's just desperation. I mean, we had an event last night. We had over 50 people out there, fired up. We spoke. I answered a bunch of questions. That's my 20th event around the whole district. We've delivered almost 3,000 individual yard signs. And I want to thank my opponent for increasing my name recognition and prompting a lot more people to ask for more yard signs. So we'll be delivering those today. And so thank him for increasing my name recognition around the district. But, John, we're very happy where we are. We think we're going to do very, very well. And listen, I know that we're under attack and they're pulling out all the stops in a failing campaign, but I think we need leaders in Congress and elsewhere who are able to see clarity through chaos and be able to get things done. And I think we're going to do very, very well on June 14th.
Well, it's going to be interesting, no doubt. I thought, the attacks, they brought things up from some time ago. Also, I just want to mention, they got a picture of you. This is apparently from one of your Facebook albums, from one of your Navy SEAL get-togethers. I thought that was a little odd.
They for your listeners out there, there's a photo album that honors one of my best friends, if not my best friend, who was killed in Afghanistan. It was a Navy SEAL. And they took a picture from the album, cropped him out, and used that picture to attack me. I'm just not sure what's more despicable. This is the chairman of the prayer caucus, supposedly. So it's your true colors come out when things get tough. And Randy Forbes, when things got tough, he abandoned his people to save his butt, and now he's losing this election. So they're trying to, smear me, a fellow Republican elected official. The only thing that we've talked about, and he'll tell you it's negative, I would argue that it's not. It's not negative for me to talk about facts. It's not negative. He can't vote for himself. It's not negative for me to say that he passed one bill in 16 years to rename a post office, because that's a fact. It's not an attack. I don't, we look for things in his record to see where we can contrast, but he doesn't really have a record. There's just nothing there. So, I just don't, I don't think those things are out of line. I think that the attacks that Randy has done and how they try to frame them are out of line. Think about what was this, fugitive from justice. There were 4 convictions across the country. Well, there's 3 in Virginia and 1 in Maryland, and they're speeding tickets. And I think 3 of them are about over a decade old. And, the way they frame it is, I'm a convict. But, of course, I'm endorsed by the sheriff, the Police Benevolent Association. We're going to be releasing an endorsement from the Commonwealth Attorney today. So all the law enforcement bodies have endorsed me. So I just think that this is just an act of desperation, a last-ditch act to get somebody elected. And, again, when the things get really tough for Mr. Forbes, his true colors come out. So we're gonna do very well, John. I can promise you that. We have a lot of people who are coming out. They're energized. They're coming. There's a lot of energy, certainly in Virginia Beach for Mr. Forbes too, but it's not the kind of energy that he wants. So I think we're going to do very well.
Negative ads like that in the mail. We saw it in the Eric Cantor onslaught against Dave Bratt at the end of that campaign. Nobody had heard of Dave. He was not area of Glen Allen, and they raised his name recognition dramatically by sending those mailers out. So they kind of backfired. So maybe the same thing can happen. I can
tell you, John, that I'm known. I'm definitely very well known in Virginia Beach, of course.
Right.
And what our data says is I have very high positives and very low negatives. Mr. Forbes has a lot higher negatives. So think about this for a second. If I start attacking somebody that you like, how does that make you feel? I think they ran a very poor campaign, and I think this was also a mistake, and I think it's going to backfire.
All right, we'll see how it plays out, no doubt. I want to get to some of the issues. Scott, let's get to Tim Kaine releases a salvo. Our senator from Virginia sends a letter to President Obama, puts it in the media, and says that right now one of the things he really wants to see is to get all 10,000 Syrian refugees into the United States and resettled before the end of fiscal year 2016, which is September. So far, only 1,800 have come in, so he's asking for the other 8,800 to be expedited, saying we can vet them, that's fine. Now, each one of them to resettle costs $65,000. You were in the Middle East, so many of your friends shed their blood to keep some of these countries free. Here's my question. Why doesn't the Saudis take them, Kuwait take them, the Arab Emirates take them, Dubai take them, Kuwait, who your friends defended with their blood, they're not taking them. If you were in Congress now, would you be in favor of taking in all these Syrian refugees or not?
Absolutely not. And I've been very vocal. And I think you remember, John, I spent my Christmas vacation on the Syrian border this year.
Right.
I didn't want to just talk about it or write about the refugee program, but I wanted to actually see it and smell it and feel it and talk to people and see what was going on over there. And as you mentioned, $65,000 per resettlement. So in my opinion, and obviously, just like the director of the FBI has said that they can't be 100% vetted, and I've been to countries like that, and there are obvious reasons they don't have institutions like we have. So there's a national security situation there, but the reality is if you push that aside and say how do we want to be most effective, best and quite frankly the world. When I was over there, it was very clear there's plenty of land there, and there's also most of the people that I spoke to, they want to stay there. They want to return once there's a political military solution into Syria. So if you're talking $65,000 per resettlement, imagine how much we could actually help if we directed funds there. And Europe too. And created basically a city there, because when I was in the Al-Zatari refugee camps, and there was 120,000 people there. It was already a city, but
right.
They couldn't work because they were in Jordan. But there was a black market, which of course raised commodity prices and depressed wages. But the Jordanians, our allies who have taken them in, their budgets are very, very stretched. And quite frankly, we have to help them out, because guess what's right next to Jordan? Israel. And Jordan is ripe for being infiltrated by ISIS as well too. I mean, I was sitting on the border there, Syrian border, with the Jordanian. And about 2,000 meters away was ISIS-controlled stuff. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you could see them. So there's a big problem there. And in my opinion, the West could direct funds if they're going to help, which I think it's in our best interest to help a little bit there, but not expediting and resettling, and growing that program over here when you don't know if you can vet them. And quite frankly, it doesn't really help out the situation. It's treating a symptom and not the cause. So if we're going to do anything, I think it should be done over there, and I think that you can exponentially help a hell of a lot more people right there on the border than you would by resettling them over here.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yesterday on my show, Congressman Forbes, we were talking about the National Defense Authorization Act, which is coming up now. It's in markup in Congress. There's an $18 billion differential between the House version and the Senate version. The Senate And Congressman Forbes, who's on the Armed Services Committee, is pushing for the House bill with the other extra $18 billion, saying that we need that money to build ships in our area.
I think that a lot of the ships aren't built in our area that he's talking about, and I think that one of the things that he's doing, and quite frankly, I disagree with the Armed Services, him and the chairman as well too, because they're to pay for that, because the law of the land right now, John, is sequestration, right? That's the law of the land is actually cuts. It's not increase in spending, it's cuts. So you can say that this pie in the sky, I'm going to build all these ships and everything, but you don't have the money to maintain them. You don't have the money to man them. You're just building ships. And furthermore, the way that they're trying to pay for it is to raid the Overseas Contingency Fund. And what that is, for your listeners out there, is what funds the war effort. So those people that you were speaking about who are overseas right in Iraq right now, 3 of which have died, a Marine, a Special Forces person, and a Navy SEAL have died in the fight against ISIS. Those contingency funds fund their war efforts, something that Congress, as you know very well, has been hiding in the weeds and hasn't stood up and said we're going to unify the country or not in the fight against ISIS, because they want to continue to just blame Obama. But the reality is they're going to raid the war funds in hopes that the next president will give them a supplemental. That is irresponsible, and it's horrible for the troops who are actually in the field. And think about this for a second. You own a trucking business, for example. And this is the logic that I think is flawed in terms of just building ships. I agree with Congressman Forbes that we need more ships, but the way you go about doing it at this time, I think the logic is very flawed. If you have a trucking company, for example, and you have 10 trucks on the road, and those trucks are hurting for parts, like our military, the aircraft going through museums and stuff. So you have 10 trucks on the road, you have people in the seats driving the trucks, you're having a tough time paying their benefits, you're having a tough time maintaining those trucks. Why in the hell would you go out and buy 10 new shiny trucks that you can't maintain them or equip them with drivers? How does that make any sense? It makes no sense. So I just disagree with the logic. I wouldn't say that Mr. Forbes doesn't have good intent or that he's not a military supporter, because I think that he is. I just think that logic is flawed.
So are you saying that you would be more inclined to go with the U.S. Senate version of the bill, which is $18 billion less?
What I'm saying to you is, what is killing the military? What is hurting the readiness? What is causing furloughs? What is causing military officers not to be promoted in the natural order that they would typically, which of course hurts their careers and their families, is sequestration. So until you have the guts to deal with that, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's what's hurting this area. That's what's hurt families. That's what's caused layoffs in this area. And we have, of course, I think it's just a year reprieve, and then it's coming back. Mm-hmm. So until you do something with that, the real tough stuff, all the theater stuff, is ridiculous to me.
Okay, also, I want to get your comments on this. Congressman Forbes a few days ago, but on my show yesterday, introducing legislation to restrict foreign work visas. Now, this is something that I've been in favor of and harping on for some time. And Congressman Forbes put that out yesterday, saying that, number one, they can't be vetted properly. Number two, we don't know where they go when they don't comply. Number three, which is my issue, is the more foreign workers you bring in, you flood the labor market with cheap labor and you hurt Americans from getting jobs. How do you stand on that?
Well, obviously I don't disagree with it, but what I would tell you, John, is, as you just said, that you've been talking about it for a while, and that there was a report that came out in 2012 saying just that. So it's very interesting that Congressman Forbes, who's been busier in the past 2 months than he's been in the past 10 years, now puts forth legislation to deal with the refugees. It's interesting that Congressman Forbes then puts legislation in for the Iran, with the treatment of our soldiers, and goes on TV and talks about, you'd be shocked of what I know, but I can't tell you because it's classified, when you didn't see him when it actually happened. So I a lot of this stuff is very political for him, just trying to get reelected. So I'm not saying that I disagree with him, because I agree with him, but where was he in 2012 when that was an issue? Nowhere. It's only when his political life is on the line that you hear from him and the wonderful things that he's doing.
Okay, we are out of time. I want to thank Scott Taylor for being with us. Scott, running for Congress, June 14th, primary, 2nd District to replace Scott Ridgel, Scott Taylor, Randy Forbes, and Pat Cardwell. You can learn more about Scott. Go to scotttaylor.us, scotttaylor.us.